I've always been fascinated by the supernatural, but I've never experienced anything myself. I've often wondered why such things seem to happen only to others. But what I'm about to share has given me some sort of explanation, though it's not exactly comforting. A few years ago, I was at home chatting with my grandfather. We were having an ordinary conversation that somehow drifted towards the supernatural. I shared some of my friends' alleged experiences and probably mentioned one or two creepy stories. My grandfather was a wonderful man, very funny, but like many of his generation, he didn't talk much about things he considered personal. He didn't contribute much to our conversation, mostly just sitting there smiling and nodding. Eventually, I asked him directly, "Have you ever experienced anything supernatural?" He chuckled a bit and quickly said, "No." I persisted. "Are you sure? Try to remember." But he kept dismissing the question. I finally gave up and jokingly said, All right. If you cross over to the other side, you'll have to come haunt me." That's when his expression became serious. He looked down at the table and sighed, as if weighing something in his mind. Then he looked me in the eye and said, "I will never make that promise, and I don't want you to, either." It was an unexpected shift in mood, and he wasn't acting like himself at all. I looked at him, puzzled, and he must have realized he couldn't just say something like that without explaining. In a low, serious voice, he said he would tell me about an experience he'd had, even though he didn't want to. This is what he told me.
"I once had a friend with whom supernatural topics sometimes came up. We often joked about how we'd visit each other from the other side, no matter who passed away first. Even though it was all in good fun, we both knew it was a promise. When he passed away several years later, of course I mourned him. But after a while, when the grief had subsided, I remembered the promise. I even said out loud that he was welcome to fulfill it. But as time went on, I began to grow skeptical about the supernatural and the afterlife. I thought that maybe it all just goes dark after death, or perhaps we go to heaven. Wherever we end up, though, it didn't seem like there was a direct line back to the living world. Then, one night, I woke up lying on my side. When I turned onto my back, I saw a vague, dark figure at the foot of my bed. Thanks to the moonlight, I could make out my friend. I was speechless. No matter how much you imagine these things, it's never what you think it'll be in real life. Instinctively, I recoiled from the figure and sat upright against the headboard, facing him. He didn't look like he used to. His body was damaged. His head had many bald patches, and his eyes had a cloudy film over them. I couldn't say a word. Imagine we had promised each other this, and now I was sitting there, unable to believe my eyes, let alone speak. The silence didn't last long, though. My friend's ghost opened his mouth. He stood there for a second or two, mouth agape, before a strange, wet sound came up from his throat. Slowly, the sounds formed into words. At first, I couldn't understand a thing, as it was mostly garbled mumbling. But after a while, I could make out the single phrase that came from his lips. like a mantra. Never promise anyone this. This is hell. I soon realized what he meant. Whatever he had gone through to send me this sign from the other side, it had been horrible. I nodded silently, and then his body began to make strange noises. His joints started creaking, and soon every bone in his body began to crack. In his cloudy eyes, which had once been my friends, I could see pain, regret, and above all, fear. He opened his mouth again, but this time no sound came out. His body twisted in agony, and all I could do was watch. Dear God, help this soul, I thought. At the same time, the ghost began to fade, and soon I was sitting alone in my room again. But the fear my friend had felt had now taken root inside me. What that fear was about, I didn't know then, and I still don't know today. But whatever it is, I know it's something I never want to experience. From that day on, I made a vow to myself never to promise a greeting from the other side again. So I won't promise one to you either, because the fear that settled in me that day is a constant burden, and I mourn for my friend who is still trapped in that hell.
After my grandfather told me this, I promised him I would never make such promises, and we soon switched to another topic. Since that day, I've wondered. Maybe I'm not receptive, or maybe those who wish to linger in this world face a fate worse than hell. Is that why I've never experienced anything? Is the fate my grandfather's friend faced, and may still be facing, worse than having your soul extinguished forever? I haven't been able to answer those questions, but one thing I know for sure: I'll never promise anyone a greeting from the other side.